I'm here to tell you that I totally enjoyed Michael's presentation. Which reinforced in me the fact that no matter where we come from, we actually have more in common than we have apart. I'm going to tell you a story. As a very young boy, I was dropped on my head. I can't remember if it was mom or dad or one of the siblings, but ever since then, I have been a really disruptive individual. And that is my brand, and I am unapologetic for that brand. So it only seemed right that I bring me to you in the way that I was conceived post the drop. So let me start at the end. You've heard a lot about change and change management. I really think that change is a choice. I think you can deny, you can defend, or you can disrupt. My recipe for all of our clients around the world, and my recommendation to you, is that you amp up your disruptive tendencies. Now, I have to spend the next 28 minutes and 22 seconds telling you why I believe that. So to make it interesting, I'm going to award 5 free copies of my best-selling book, Straight Talk on Leadership, to those people that I think ask the best questions. Okay? So we're going to leave time for questions. Let's move on. 3 themes that I really want to touch on today, I really want to cover with you. Number 1, I want to talk about myths and misconceptions. I think Canadians are walking around today with so many urban myths in their heads that it is quite disturbing. I think we need to get to an adult conversation about the reality rather than the fabricated conversation that we have around the edge of the things that matter. Number 2, I'd like to talk about transformational competencies. I actually prefer the word transformation to change because I believe that we have too much little change and we need big T transformation. And I believe that there are a particular set of competencies. And I'm not quite sure, the doctor might be able to help me, whether we're born that way or whether we're made that way. And I'm not going to get into that conversation because the fact of the matter is the times in which we live dictate the skills, competencies, attitudes, mindsets, and beliefs that we need to have. And God forbid that you be out of sync with the times in which we live. Challenges and blind spots is the third thing I'd like to talk about. There are some, and Michael was right in his presentation, there are some well-known potholes, well, other than the ones we have in the city of Toronto, but there are some well-known potholes that organizations going through change fall victim to. So those are the things I'm going to talk to you about. Let me begin, if I can, with the big picture. The seismic shifts that we have seen in the last 10, 15, 20 years are not going to stop. We are going to continue to be rocked by these shifts. The shock waves will continue to hit our shores, wave after wave. They will knock us off our feet. They will destabilize us. They will scare us. But there are more shock waves coming. The result of this, which we didn't ask for and is quite inconvenient to us, the result of this is that we have a dramatically different context. We are all operating, whether we're in the corporate sector, the healthcare sector, the education sector, it doesn't matter, your context has changed. I would give you some free advice from the podium. That advice would be do a much better job than you're currently doing, trying to understand the external context. If you do not understand the magnitude, complexity, interrelationships, and consequences of this change context, you will not be able to lead anything. Change leadership begins with you having outstanding contextual intelligence. So we have the context, and then we have the landscape. So we have the air above us, and we have the ground underneath our feet. And so we have, as a result of the shock waves, we have a radically new landscape. To go along with all of that, we have a new set of rules, and I'm happy to debate with anyone what those rules are, but you might as well throw out the book you've had. God bless John Cotter. God bless any other guru from the past. Frankly, no one has been in a period like this. And before you think I'm being negative, let me correct you. This is the most magnificent moment of opportunity that we have seen in a very long time. So for anyone who's born to be a disruptor or a change agent, who really believes in transformation and fundamental transformation, these are the best of times, not the worst of times. We live in this interconnected world. There truly is a new set of economic drivers, and good news is everything you need to know about the global economy is available 24/7, 365 for free. Ignorance is no longer an excuse. You can go to reports out of Davos. You can go to stuff that's coming out of the United Nations. You can go to fp.com. You can go anywhere you want. And everything that you need to know to have you help you understand the context is there. So the game has changed. The responsibility is on you, not your leader. Change does not happen from the top. It happens from within the organization. I'd love to debate Michael on this. I actually think that really big change happens in the middle of an organization. I think middle management matters more than senior management. So, I take the point, and you should too, that in a world of democratic equalization in terms of knowledge, it's not what you know, it's whether you can access what you know when you need it. And that is an open world. And boy, oh boy, does that change things. So if I take all the gurus and I put them together and I kind of net it out and kind of what all these gurus, whether they're central bank directors or whether they're economists or academics or whoever else you want, there is a kind of a consensus view out there. And the consensus view is that this new normal is going to be with us, and there's no end in sight. Consensus view number 2, the process of creative destruction coined in the 1930s by Joseph Schumpeter is picking up speed. We will in fact see more disruption. If we were true to the beliefs of Joseph Schumpeter, we would actually want to accelerate the rate of destruction in order to create free space for new things to happen. One of the things that I look at when our team goes into an organization, I look at their rate of abandonment. Are they getting rid of stuff at a healthy and good rate? Are they confident enough to move on and to abandon or to destroy? Consensus view number 3, the markets always have and will increasingly thrive on the economic principle of discontinuity. Now, discontinuity is a really fancy word for chaos. Chaos is a really fancy word for opportunities that lie in the valleys between what we know and what we don't know, and those are rich seams of opportunity for anyone to mine. Consensus view number 4, following sucks. I will thank my daughter Carolyn for giving me the new language, but following really does suck. When you're a follower, when you are number 2 or number 3 or number 4 in the market, you are the economic shock absorber. As a proud patriot and Canadian, Canada is not leading. We are following. We're on the verge of being irrelevant, and we are going to take a disproportionate number of shocks because we have not made ourselves as relevant as we could be on the world stage. We have an unbelievable brand, the brand called Canada. In economic terms, it's under-leveraged. So what is this new reality? Conflicting challenges. Doesn't matter what you are, where you are, at what level in your organization, you will be asked to do at least 2 things at the same time and probably more. You'll have to learn how to do that. The turbulence will continue. The captain will come on the flight and tell you to fasten your seatbelts, and you would be well advised to take his or her advice. Unresolved tensions on both a political level and a societal level, income disparity, and a long list of other things We are so far from resolving the inherent tensions in the global world, even in Canada, that it's a little shocking. Chaos and confusion will be around us. It's not going to go away. We will have unnerving complexity, permanent unpredictability, puzzling paradox, and ruthless, ruthless competition. All of that, and a longer list that I could give you, is simply to say that that puts a huge coping challenge on anyone that's a leader, be they big L leader or small L leader. I think we need to do a much better job of helping people cope with what's going on. And hence, I think we need to understand what some of those coping challenges are, and they are certainly around refining the way in which we collaborate, private-public sector, etc. They certainly around building operational dexterity into our organizations, and at the top, embedding some principles around transformational thinking. So it's about choices. And it really is a choice, and it's in your hands and my hands and his hands and their hands and Rob Ford's hands and whoever hands they want to put it in, but it's about choices. And I'm going to net it out in a simple way for you. You can either have a doomsday mindset about all of this, where your objective is to slow down and control the rate of change and contain the unintended consequences, or you can have a mindset of reimagination. And for any of us that are built with this particular genetic predisposition, this is an unbelievably exciting time because it affords us all the opportunity to think in the future tense. And since we're all going to live in the future anyway, I would rather be spending more of my time thinking about the future than whining about the present or being kind of nostalgic for the past. It's a choice. It's a choice. So what's the shift been? And this all happens within a broad sweeping context. So you may not have come here for an economics lesson, but let me give you at least 35 seconds of economic backdrop to this. Over the long sweep of history, the times in which we have lived have dictated the things that we have done and the way in which we think. We have gone in an economic cycle from value being created by what you dig or what you grow to what you do, and from what you do to what you know, and from what you know to now what you share. Networks and access matter, and probably are the most important thing for a leader to master these days. Is their network as vibrant and as diverse as it needs to be in order to allow them to connect the dots in new and exciting ways? So I don't think that the answer to the times in which we live is more cemeteries of information. I really believe it's new cradles of knowledge, and for anyone who likes to learn and is curious and is adventurous, this is a wonderful, wonderful time. So we go at this not in ignorance. We actually do have a great body of work that can help us all in our organizations, be they large or small, about what we need to do. So here are some of the lessons that I think are important. Faint signals from the periphery matter. Those vague, small, blinking lights just over the horizon are really, really important to pay attention to. And I know that's tough when your head's down on your day job, but I don't see how you can be a successful transformational leader if you don't have a system, a radar system, if you like, to pick up these faint signals from the periphery. Now, Michael wouldn't have known that I have the same view as him on how. How matters so much more than what. The how is the difference. Most of the things that have been great breakthroughs throughout history haven't been in the what we do, but it's been in the how that we do them. It wasn't that transportation changed, it was in how we transported. And you can go through pretty much every single invention, including the iPod, and we've always listened to music The what didn't change, the how changed. And I think there's just untapped potential to really begin to look into the how. Opportunity share matters. I almost snicker when I go into a boardroom with a CEO and they talk about market share. Market share is so yesterday. Market share tells you nothing about the future. The question that you should be asking in your organization, whether it's for profit or otherwise, are we gaining a disproportionate share of the opportunity? That's what matters. I want your opportunity share to go up, and if you're doing that, then you're on the right track. Like Michael, I also agree that culture matters. I would also probably have it number 1 or 2 on my list. So the conditions that the leaders create, otherwise known as the culture, is the petri dish in which all good things and experiments take place. So, time to rethink. Control, Alt, Delete, reset, reboot. I think there's some things that are worth 13 minutes and 52 seconds of your time. I think getting your head around being a provocateur and actually accelerating the rate of destruction is an important part of the change agenda. We're living with stuff today that neither looks good nor does it work very well. Why are we so patient? Why do we put up for so long with stuff that doesn't work? Why don't we just get rid of it? Because it's clogging up our capacity to refresh. In the same way, I think that we do, and these are not just words on a slide, although they do kind of come off the lips of many leaders and CEOs, we actually have to learn how to fail faster. We are in a war for learning and new insights, and we're going to have to stub our toes. And for an organization to be afraid of stubbing its toe, for people in the middle management ranks of an organization to be afraid of the repercussions for making a mistake is sad, and it works against us, our organizations, and our country. Rethink number 2, shift perspectives. Too many people everywhere caught in the wrong mindsets. If I look at a leader today, if you said to me, Doug, what's the number 1 important attribute of a leader today? I would tell you that it's their sense-making and sense-shaping context. I think what most people want is not to fight change. I happen to think that's a myth. I think all the research shows that people don't hate change, they hate uncertainty. They hate the uncertainty that is wrapped around change. So the leader that knows how to sense-make and sense-shape and connect the dots into a compelling narrative has an ability to progress and drive change. Rethink number 3. Henry Mintzberg of McGill University is 100% right. Strategic planning is dead. We need to get better at strategic thinking. Most people, most Canadian companies, are very good at strategic planning, but they're very, very bad at strategic thinking. And strategic thinking is about the context. And quite frankly, my friends, garbage in, garbage out. You know how much time we all spend on the strategic plan. Compare it to how much time we spend on the strategic thinking. And another way to think about that is our organization built to exploit what we have, or are we built to explore the possibility? When I walk into a lobby, when I walk into a boardroom, when I walk into an executive suite, it probably doesn't take more than 10 minutes for you to be able to determine through the lobby test, is this an organization built to exploit today or explore tomorrow? That comes back now to some economics. We'll go to Economics 201. Value lies not at the core of a market, but at the fringe. The reason that the faint signals from the periphery are important is all of the good, funky, new, breakthrough stuff that actually creates economic value happens not at the core of a market, but at a fringe of a market. At the fringe of a market where disruptors live, where the Steve Jobses live, Value enhancement does not happen at the core. So transformational leadership, what is it? I think there's a cognitive piece and I think there's an emotional piece. Let me run through it. On the cognitive piece, I certainly want leaders that challenge conventional wisdom. I want them to really turn it upside down. I want those leaders to alter the beliefs and priorities that we have. I want them to unleash a catalytic virus from the middle management group. But more than all of that, and forget all of that, I want you to do one thing. Confront the biases that we have individually in our teams and in our organizations. We all have them. Most can see them. Change leaders, attack them. On the emotional side, I think there's also some things that need to happen. Sure, we want this transformational leader to have a compelling vision and belief. Yeah, it'd be nice if those leaders had a genuine passion. But I'll tell you what, I'd rather my leader be really good in the gray. I would rather my leader be an absolute master at not being paralyzed by ambiguity and uncertainty. And then I could take all of those, but if I only had one, I would amp up dissatisfaction. I got this funny little idea in my head that dissatisfaction is the fuel for change and transformation. I think we need leaders that are more dissatisfied. And there sure is enough to be dissatisfied about. So what's the cognitive toolkit that you need to do this? Design thinking would be my contribution to you. I think it's a wonderfully exciting area. Roger Martin at the University of Toronto calls it integrative thinking. I won't debate that with Roger, but I actually think the concept of design thinking is more appropriate. And that's the cognitive piece that you can go to. If you're not familiar with the company IDEO and IDEO and their CEO, Tim Brown, please download one of his books and get your head into design thinking. What's the emotional toolkit? Okay, so we got the emotional toolkit, SNA. What's SNA? All right, social network architecture. What's social network architecture? Well, social network architecture says that the org chart on the left doesn't matter. It's the one on the right. I challenge you, in your organization, no matter how big or small, redraw your org chart based not on hierarchy, but based on influence. And you're gonna find that the social network architecture around how things actually get done, who's influential, is way more important and tells you way much more about the organization than the org chart. So think networks, and that's the world we're in. So in summary, you only have 6 minutes and 52 seconds more of agony. I want to leave you with a graphic image. I believe that leadership needs to be tailored to the times in which we live. And I love music, and I love classical music. But in order to be considered an outstanding classical musician, you're expected to play the notes exactly the way Beethoven wrote them. That's not the times in which we live. I kind of think the times in which we live are more like a sweaty jazz bar in New Orleans or the Dubrovnik Jazz Festival. I think we live in times that require us to have more of the skills, competencies, beliefs, attitudes, and mindsets of a jazz musician. And if you know anything about jazz, you will know what makes a great jazz musician. Imagination, inspiration, improvisation. I just got this view that because of the times in which we live, we've got to play this era more like you would if you were a jazz musician. Now, that's not to say that there isn't a hard side to leadership today to go along with the soft side. And certainly in transformational leaders, I want them to be competent and I want them to be capable. But I'll tell you what I want more than anything else. I want them to be credible. I think we have a credibility deficit. I think way too many leaders are at the top of the org chart leading, but they're actually not credible. And I have this funny belief that credibility is like a stock price, that your credibility, yours, mine, the leaders, the prime ministers, the mayors, the credibility goes up and down during the day, just like a stock price. And I think there's some things that impact that credibility. And there are two that I want to share with you. To be a credible leader today, you better have a track record of making fantastic decisions. You better have DMQ, decision-making intelligence. And on the other side, you better have a gobload of EQ. Because I'm going to tell you what, if you're a leader that makes bad decisions slowly and you have bad relationships with people, you have no credibility. On the other hand, if your brand, your personal brand, is high on decision-making acumen and combined with the ability to have great relationships, you will have high credibility. Why do you need it? Here's why. There's a contract between the leader and the followers. The leader needs to give the followers something. And we're not paying enough attention to followership. But if a leader doesn't give these things to the followers, then the followers won't give this back to the leader. You see, it's the people that give the leaders permission to lead. The legitimacy of a leader, particularly a leader during a period of significant change, has to come from the followers. If the leader does the right things and if the contract gets built this way, then the leader gets back permission to make decisions and drive change. I'd like you to consider the importance of followership. I'd like you to reflect on the importance of credibility. I'd like you to go out of here and refine your personal brand. If you haven't done a personal brand audit, if you haven't thought about your brand, if you haven't taken the science of branding and brought it to you, please do so, because I think your brand matters. Number two, build your followership. Followers are more important than leaders, particularly those followers in the middle management ranks of organizations, particularly those that are influential in an SNA way. And the third and last thing I want you to do is stock your credibility bank. And let me tell you why. Because the great leaders need a pool of goodwill to dip into on those days and in those moments when they have to make a really tough decision. And if that leader hasn't developed that goodwill bank, that credibility bank, that stock pile of goodwill, I don't know how they're going to be able to lead when it matters most, which is when it goes super crazy, super wacky, and the leader has to make a decision on the spot and can't consult. I'd be happy to take any questions. Remember, there are 5 books here, free books. The inventories, I got to move the inventory.
There's a question there, and then we'll take the one from the gentleman here. Sorry.
Hi, thanks very much for your presentation. It was really interesting. There was a book that just came out just a month or so ago, and it's called Tragedy in the Commons. And it was written by an organization from, I think, Samara. And they went out and interviewed about 80 MPs. And the level of dissatisfaction was just unbelievable. And about 80% of those MPs didn't know what their role was. Yeah. And so, without naming names, if you look at leadership, within the government of Canada, very top down, but there always seems to be people that like that type of leadership, or someone is let go and there's another one to quickly fill, that position. So I'd be very curious in your perspective on that type of leadership. And
I have to be really careful here. We have several government organizations as clients, including Export Development Canada and the Bank of Canada and Canadian Deposit Insurance Corporation. So I have to be very careful how I answer this. However, because I was dropped on my head as a child, I feel compelled to answer your question. I just think we've done a lousy job of holding our politicians accountable, and I think the politicians have done a lousy job of holding the bureaucrats accountable. I spent 2 years working in the federal government, some of the best, smartest people that I ever could see, constrained and choking to death because of the conditions under which they're asked to operate. So I have, my sympathies lie with the public servants, and my finger goes to poor leadership in the bureaucratic ranks. Hopefully that doesn't get me fired.
Add something to that. I mean, you see lots of leaders. I mean, if we take it out of political context, if you look at, say, the banking situation in the UK, where a number of leaders guilty of some quite egregious things, and yet they still obviously have the support of their boards of directors, their shareholders, etc. It seems to me that uncredible leadership, lack of credibility is not an obstacle to leading successful large businesses as a sort of an absolute piece. But anyway, there was a question here, sorry.
Yeah, I was going to ask you a question about the difference between disruptive leadership and someone who's a middle manager who's just a fecal agitator, for want of a better word. But I think you've answered that with credibility. I'm just wondering, in your last part of discussion on credibility, do all the same rules apply to middle managers as upper managers?
You know, I think I've kind of grown out of the belief that there are universal rules. You know, I think that was the convenient old way. I don't think they're universal rules. I think Michael would agree with me on that. I'm going to answer your question a little bit differently. In every organization, there are terrorists. Sorry if that offends you. It's fact. The terrorists go by 3 different names: the cynics, the victims, and the bystanders. I can live with the cynics. I cannot live with the bystanders. And I think this country is full of compliant, complacent bystanders. That's a vote of 1. Next.
Another question.
I thought he was going to ask about the Leafs or something. Didn't do
So if, as you say, Canada sucks as a leader, what parts of where in the world do you think there are people who are better at picking up on the faint signals and doing something with it?
Yeah. Can I recommend, because I don't have enough time to do it, could I recommend you buy the book Hidden Champions? If you haven't seen the book Hidden Champions, you should. It's a study done of all the great organizations in the world that we've never heard of that are hidden champions. And they're defined as companies that have over a 90% global market share. There are so many of them that it is so exciting beyond belief. Let me give you just 2 examples because it kind of really gets me PO'd, okay? The number 1 producer of electric farm fences is a company called Gallagher from New Zealand. Now, the last time I looked, we got farms, we need fences. How on earth did Gallagher's out of New Zealand do that? The second example I would give you, these are from the book Hidden Champions, the number 1 producer of fish processing equipment in the world with over a 90% global market share is from Iceland. Now, no offense to the Icelandic people, but my goodness, we kind of got fish all around us. What is it that has stopped us from being what we're capable of being? And the answer is complacency. We think small. There's a deficit of ambition. So there are any number of examples, and the best place to go is the book Hidden Champions, and you're going to find like 300 of them. How many Canadian? 0.
Okay, so we've got quite a few questions, so we'll ask if you keep your questions brief, and Doug, if you keep your answers brief. We'll take like 2 or 3 more, and then we have to move to a break. So there was one at the front here, I believe. At the back.
Great,
sorry, yes.
great presentation, thank you. What would be your number 1 piece of advice to give to leaders that have their head in the sand around this disruption that is with us?
Yeah, I really think, great question. I really think it's back to amping up dissatisfaction. To be a little graphic about this, I've never met a transformational leader that didn't have hemorrhoids. I have never met a transformational leader that didn't have a perpetual itch. Andy Grove from Intel was right 20 years ago when he wrote the book, Only the Paranoid Survive. That's what you need to do. Yes.
As a change practitioner, often you're called to organizations where the leader has no credibility. You talk about that for transformational leadership, you need credibility. How do you address that?
Yeah, you address it by putting together, and I will borrow this from Cotter and from Michael's slide, a coalition of middle managers. You reach down into the belly of the organization and you supplement or augment the weaknesses of the leader by some highly motivated people from the middle management ranks. I got to tell you, I'm optimistic about people. It is my firm belief that the common man and women will delight you every time if you give them a chance. So you reach down.
Gail?
I want to say amen to everything you said.
Right.
I'm a believer. I'm looking to figure out how to help other people become believers. And I'm looking for examples to point to in the Canadian landscape of leaders who give you hope.
Yeah, so in the last 6 months, we've been working very closely with Peter Aceto and the people at Tangerine, and I think Peter was maybe here yesterday.
Yeah.
I have to tell you, in 32 years of seeing leaders, Peter is the closest to the real package that I've ever seen. So he was one that I would really look at, and it's just fortunate that you saw him yesterday.
Okay,
Yes.
so we'll just take the question here, and then we'll take that one over there, and then we have to wrap up. And just to be brief, you're around for the balance of the day. You're not shooting off, heading out straight away, are you?
No, I'm here until 5 o'clock, you told me.
Okay.
Thank you for your presentation.
De nada. Yes.
I come from a design world. Actually, I'm an industrial designer, and what you were saying about creative destruction was rather interesting to me because
Right.
in the design world, we've always built something in called product obsolescence. And what I'm really curious about is why have our leaders not taken that cue, because it's existed for many, many years. They've completely missed that target of building that into their business.
I'll tell you why. Because their mental model is wrong. Because they believe the definition of a leader is to create predictability and zero tolerance on deficits. Okay? It's the wrong model. So they build something and they think it's perfect. Whereas anyone in the design world knows about prototypes and understands that you learn from prototypes, so you actually don't want to build anything that lasts forever. In fact, you want to do the same thing that the people do that give us our milk and our meat, stamp an expiry date on everything and force yourself to revisit it. And we don't do it. Why? Because we're lazy. Yes?
Your presentation was great. Thank you for that.
How much is it worth to you?
I can't begin to tell you.
I'm just kidding.
But that being said, when it comes to leadership and leadership that has their head in the sand, any tips on how you kick them in the backside to get them going?
Yeah, so I think it goes back to contextual intelligence. I think there's so much information out there that points at all of the things we need to do. I really think it's about exposing them to all the faint signals that are kind of coming at us. So I think it's an educational process, and I think there's just so much great information. There can't be anyone that didn't read the Davos report from this year. If you're a CEO or a leader, managing director or president, it should shake you to the ground. So the good news is I think you got lots of information. Package it and hit them over the head with it. Well, their head's in the sand, so I don't know how you're going to do that, but yeah.
Okay, with that, we'll close. So thank you very much, Doug. That was
Pleasure.
great. Now, I noticed you have been videoing this, so is that something that's going to be?
I wanted to show my wife how good
It's
I am.
just for your wife, right? Okay.
Yeah.
but-
If you want to pick up one of the books, Mike over here has 5 copies of the book for those of you that ask questions.
Okay.
The video will be on dougwilliamson.ca. Follow me on Twitter, @BluntLeader. Geez, I wonder why I picked that as the handle. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you very much.